Following the WWE's purchase of both ECW and WCW, Vince McMahon had a bit of a problem on his hands. Along with the purchase, he had an excessive amount of stars who were now under contract to him, and because of this, there was not much in the way of TV time to present all the talent that they had. So after WrestleMania 18 in 2002, it was decided to introduce the WWE Draft Lottery, also called the brand extension. They would select wrestlers and other on-screen personalities to exclusively appear on either Raw or SmackDown. Following this, some guys stayed on their respective shows for a certain amount of time before switching brands just like that. While there was no draft lottery in 2003, the second draft was held on the March 22nd, 2004 edition of Raw, and during this event, SmackDown managed to hit the jackpot when Triple H was announced as one of the picks to be drafted to the Blue brand. However, the King of Kings would end up remaining on Raw after the draft ended, so we will be looking at that today, along with the Games match with Eddie Guerrero for the WWE title, and the possible reasons given as to why Triple H didn't go to SmackDown following the draft lottery. Following the 2002 draft, Triple H was the undisputed WWF champion, and at that time, he wasn't assigned to a certain brand due to defending the belt against guys from both shows. After he dropped the belt to Hulk Hogan at the Backlash pay-per-view, Triple H would get reassigned to SmackDown and stayed there until the Vengeance pay-per-view months later, where he had the choice to stay with the Blue brand or head to Raw, which was run by recently new general manager Eric Bischoff. After some convincing from Shawn Michaels, the game ended up choosing Raw. 2 years later, we had the second ever draft lottery held on an episode of Raw, where guys from SmackDown are also there to find out their fate during the show. All throughout the night, both Raw General Manager Eric Bischoff and SmackDown General Manager Paul Heyman picked names from their respective tumblers. At the beginning of the show, Vince McMahon tells both Bischoff and Heyman backstage that throughout the night, they will both get to select 6 draft picks from the other's brand. Vince also points out that should either man not be happy with their picks, they can trade for anyone from the other's roster before the end of the night. Throughout the show, Eric and Paul take turns selecting from their tumblers, and by the time we get to the 5th pick overall, Raw has Shelton Benjamin and Nidia, whereas SmackDown currently has Rene Dupree and Mark Jindrak. When it was time for Heyman to select his 3rd pick, SmackDown's United States Champion John Cena comes out, and after he raps a promo, he approaches Heyman and Cena says he'll make the next pick for him. When Cena leaves, Paul initially tries to dismiss the pick due to Cena choosing and not himself, but Bischoff tells him that he's stuck with it, so he has to open it. Paulie opens the piece of paper and his facial expression immediately changes as Eric presses Paul to reveal who the pick is. Paul Heyman starts teasing Bischoff and asking if he's sure he wants to hear it. Heyman then says that as Eric insisted on sticking with John Cena's pick, he then lifts the piece of paper to Eric Bischoff's face and reveals that Triple H is the next pick to head to SmackDown. Backstage, the camera zooms in on the game as he spits out his water in complete shock. Raw then went to a commercial break, and during the break, we see the Raw roster singing goodbye to the King of Kings, just as he throws his bottle of water in anger. Back on stage, Eric Bischoff is clearly unhappy with the outcome and he heads backstage. We see Bischoff talking to Vince McMahon backstage, and then he tries to protest the pick by saying that it was John Cena who chose it and not Paul Heyman. Clearly, Eric Bischoff regrets telling Paul to stick with John Cena's pick. Vince then tells Eric that while he understands that he's upset about the outcome, he then states that once a draft pick has been chosen, it's official and there isn't really much Vince himself can do about it. Paul Heyman then comes alongside and he proposes an idea. Heyman suggests that they have a WWE Championship match take place in the ring. It would be champion Eddie Guerrero defending against SmackDown's new acquisition, Triple H. Eric Bischoff is no doubt not in favour of this, and Vince also seems against it, but Paul Heyman then says that he proposed this idea as Eddie Guerrero could possibly get drafted to Raw before the end of the show. Understanding where Paul Heyman is going with this, McMahon agrees to book the match, much to Eric Bischoff's dismay. Basically, Paul's idea was to have the match occur and hope that Triple H wins it, so the WWE Championship will stay on SmackDown should Guerrero get drafted. Let's now check out the WWE Championship match between Latino Heat and The Game, which main evented the show. Triple H comes out first and he's seen wearing a Raw t-shirt. Hunter then tears the shirt off to reveal a SmackDown shirt on underneath. Once in the ring, Eddie Guerrero comes out in his classic lowrider entrance, which was always awesome to see. The match gets underway and Eddie Guerrero tries to shake Triple H's hand and The Game actually goes for it, but Eddie backs off. In the corner, Eddie badmouths The Game and pushes him, which makes Hunter retaliate. Following some arm drags, Guerrero begins going after Triple H's arm and does so for a bit. The King of Kings then nails a high knee to end the attacks on his arms. Following a commercial break, Triple H has taken control of the bout as he Irish whips Eddie into the ring steps. Back in the ring, both men exchange fists and Guerrero gets backdropped in the middle of the ring. Triple H applies an abdominal stretch on Latino Heat and uses the ring rope for leverage. The referee catches him using the rope and breaks things up. Hunter then mocks Eddie Guerrero before Eddie counters an Irish whip into a tilt-a-whirl head scissors. Both men exchange fists again with Eddie coming out on top. Guerrero then goes for a tornado DDT and goes for a cover, but Hunter kicks out. Triple H nails a knee facebuster on Latino Heat and pins him, but he only gets a 2 count. Triple H then goes to the second rope and dives off, and Eddie counters with an inverted atomic drop. The Game then goes for a pedigree and Guerrero counters it into a slingshot onto the top turnbuckle. Guerrero then hits the Three Amigos and then poses to the crowd. Suddenly, we get Ric Flair and Batista come down to ringside, and the distraction allows Triple H to nail a DDT. The Nature Boy distracts the ref while Batista hands Triple H the WWE Championship belt. Just then, Batista gets pulled off the ring apron by SmackDown's John Cena and along with Rey Mysterio begin ambushing the Animal. Back in the ring, Triple H is ready to hit Eddie with the championship belt, and then Shawn Michaels storms the ring and nails Sweet Chin Music on the King of Kings. HBK then does a diving crossbody to those on the outside. Guerrero then heads to the top to nail a frog splash, but Christian then pulls Eddie down and the referee calls for the bell. So Guerrero wins the match via disqualification and thus retains the WWE title. Following the interference, guys from both Raw and SmackDown run down and a massive brawl takes place all over ringside, whilst Eddie Guerrero continues targeting Triple H in the ring, and the show ends with the brawling ending up in the ring. In the aftermath of the draft lottery, it was decided that Triple H would end up remaining on Raw, so they decided to have him traded back to the Red brand, and SmackDown would end up getting Booker T and the Dudley Boys in exchange for the King of Kings. The following week on Raw, the Hurricane came out for his entrance, but then Triple H emerged and attacked him before heading to the ring. Hunter gets a microphone and says that the attack on the Hurricane is a message for the entire Raw locker room. He then speaks about how they laughed at him when he was announced as a SmackDown draft pick, and then tells them who's laughing now and says that Eric Bischoff would have traded anyone just to get him back, which he gives Eric praise for. The fans start chanting "You suck" at Hunter while he continues praising Bischoff on the mic. He then says that Eric Bischoff will come out and officially make him the #1 contender for the World Heavyweight title and not Shawn Michaels. Eric indeed heads out and he first asks Triple H how he's doing, to which the Game replies that he feels like $1 million. Eric then says that Raw would not be the #1 rated show without him. Triple H thanks Bischoff and then changes gears and asks him about a shot at the World Heavyweight title. Bischoff says that he can't remove Shawn Michaels from the world title match at Backlash, but he can add to it. So Eric then books a rematch of the WrestleMania 20 main event between Triple H, Shawn Michaels and champion Chris Benoit. Triple H is delighted to hear the news as the segment starts to finish off. I did always wonder why Triple H did not move to SmackDown permanently in 2004. Theories and stories have been provided as to possible reasons why. Former WWE producer Bruce Pritchard spoke about the decision to keep Triple H on Raw in his Something to Wrestle podcast. The The following is what Pritchard said regarding the decision. It was one of those that looked better in the store. I think that once Vince got a look at SmackDown and Raw and he's thinking, I think Raw needs Triple H, and he wanted to make that, and we're like, well, I thought the idea was we're going to build some of these guys up. He says, yeah, but I need established talent to build them up, which I understand that as well. The idea was, nah, let's put him back on Raw, and we're sitting there thinking, okay, you do what you have to do. It was a little bit of, once you saw and once you got it there and everything, it's like, now that I'm looking at Raw and I'm looking at SmackDown, SmackDown's loaded, Raw needs something else. He didn't want to take away from a traditional SmackDown talent, or he didn't want to move Eddie or anything like that because of the similarities with Benoit, and felt that Benoit had been on SmackDown long enough. He didn't want to make that change, so he put Hunter back on Raw and felt that was stronger. There is also a possibility that Triple H himself may have told those in charge that he didn't want to switch brands. This could be true, as Paul Heyman made a mention of this when he spoke to John Bradshaw Layfield at the ECW One Night Stand event in 2005, where Heyman told JBL, "The only reason you were WWE Champion for a year is because Triple H didn't want to work Tuesdays." Tuesday being a reference to the day SmackDown was taped, as it wasn't live back in those days. Personally, I think the WWE's plan was that they wanted to give the fans an Eddie Guerrero versus Triple H match on Raw, so they came up with the idea to have the game get announced as a SmackDown draft pick, thus giving them a reason to book the match. Have Eddie retain the title and he remains on SmackDown, and then Hunter can stay put on Raw. Just looking at all the circumstances, that's my theory for these sequence of events. And looking at how SmackDown played out in 2004, it would have been interesting to see how Triple H did on the blue brand in 2004. No doubt he would have been in the title picture most of the time, but we could have seen more matches with the King of Kings facing Eddie Guerrero on pay-per-view. But then again, would JBL have been a major player in the main event scene had Triple H come to SmackDown? Who knows? So in the end, Triple H of course remained on Raw, where he, along with Evolution, continued to dominate the Red Brand's main event scene throughout 2004. And we would see Triple H get drafted to SmackDown in the 2008 draft lottery whilst as WWE Champion, and he would remain on the blue brand until the draft lottery the following year. Maybe we could look at the game's 2008 and 2009 run on SmackDown some other time. And this is where we wrap things up for today, guys. In all fairness, which some may disagree, I think Triple H staying on Raw was the best move back then. It just feels like a case of the timing wasn't right to move him away from Raw. While yes, his reign of terror and main event dominance continued on, there was no doubt that those elements would have just occurred on SmackDown had he went to the blue brand in the end. If he went there, the main event scene would have no doubt been different, and we could have seen him work with the likes of Eddie Guerrero, The Undertaker and Booker T on pay-per-view, but it wasn't to be. Thank you as always for watching.